So far, so good. We're back with Patches again. Maybe I'll get it finished off this time. The best days Patches had with us were the early ones, the ones at Mr. Z's. He had his old familiar territory to roam through. He had Blackie, Tawny, and his other cat friends to come regularly and sing with him. And every evening there was Special Kitty in the cracked bowl under the plum tree. The high point of those halcyon days came in October, when Jerry and I flew from Sacramento Valley to Vancouver Island for Laurie and George's wedding reception. Earlier, in September, they had driven on George's Goldwings motorbike to Arizona to get married on the brink of the Grand Canyon. Then they'd stopped into Oroville on their way home to see us. Before Jerry and I left to catch the plane for the wedding reception, we had a talk about Patches. "We'll be away for 7 days," I said. "What are we going to do about the cat?" "I've been thinking," Jerry said. "We can leave one of the green garden hoses turned onto a slow drip and have it drain into his water dish." "And what for food?" I asked. "If we put out a lot, the skunks will eat it." Jerry said skunks can't climb, not as far as I know. I don't think a skunk could get up onto that little table on the east veranda, the one that's built into the corner by the root cellar. "Maybe not," I said. "That sounds like a good plan. I know Patches won't let any other cat steal his food." So Jerry brought home a big bag, of Special Kitty. We poured the whole thing into a deep brown plastic dishpan. The pile of kibbles was heaped up like a cinder cone, and there was still more left, so we put the remainder into a separate saucepan, an old pot, beside the dishpan. Big old pot. "We needn't worry about Patches," Jerry said, when we were carrying our suitcases out to the Suburban to catch our plane. "He's got enough food here to last him for 2 months." We left. We had a fine time, and we came back. Jerry was walking ahead of me as we carried our Samsonite suitcases up the back steps of the east veranda. Oh, he said. "There's been some trouble here." The aluminum saucepan we'd set out for Patches was lying on its side on the floor, empty. The big brown dishpan was still on the little table, but there wasn't so much as a crumb of Special Kitty in it. We didn't find out what had happened until the next morning. We were eating hot Johnny cake outside on the hair-covered table when Jerry stopped chewing and looked past me to the far end of the veranda. His eyes went wide. He said, "Good God!" I turned in my chair, and there was Patches coming toward us. He was coming slowly. He was as wide as he was high. He looked like a big, furry football with feet. "Oh, Patches," we both cried. "How could you?" Patches wobbled over to Jerry. He sank down and spread out on the floor like a stuffed cushion. He gave us a look that was pained and satisfied at the same time, and that said, "Hi, guys." Jerry rubbed him behind the ears. "You rascal," he said. "You're accustomed to going hungry and then eating whatever comes your way, aren't you? We might have suspected you'd be an opportunistic eater." Patches didn't move. He closed his eyes, belched, and broke wind. After that, we kept clear of Patches until his innards got back to normal. But he didn't notice that we were avoiding him. He lay like a cement lawn ornament under the rose bushes and watched the lesser goldfinches splash in the shallow puddle in front of his nose. In those warm autumn days, the tide of Patches' fortune was running on the full. The tide turned in early December, when I decided it was time for travel training. We were planning to move north to Wairika on the day after Christmas. Jerry and I had made 2 weekend trips up to the Shasta Valley, and we'd bought a home on 11 acres of grassy hillside with panoramic views in all directions. The place was 3 miles to the north of town. We had no immediate neighbors, and behind us there was nothing but mountains for 60 miles all the way to the sea. For the moving, Jerry would drive ahead in a big yellow Ryder rental truck with the furniture, and I'd follow in the Suburban with the lamps, the mirrors, and the cat. The drive was 3.5 hours to the north, mostly on the I-5 interstate. I knew that I could have bought a kitty box and locked the cat into it for the trip, but that's not my style. I thought it would be more interesting to try to teach Patches to be comfortable in a moving vehicle. The first travel training session was the most memorable one. I drove Jerry to work so I could have the car for the day, and when I came home, I left the keys in the ignition. I put a book on the front seat for me to read, and I put some sardine pieces in a dish on the floor. Then I went to the house, and I laid in wait for Patches. Eventually, he came to me for a petting. I picked him up and carried him into the car with me and shut the door. "You're a lucky fellow, Patches," I told him. "You're going to have a new experience today." I read my book while he explored all the corners of the Suburban. Then he squatted on the front floor and ate the sardine pieces. When he was done, I lifted him and stretched him across my lap. I placed my left arm along his back, closed the fingers of my left hand gently around his throat, and turned the key in the ignition. Patches came to life. He tried to spring up, but I tightened my grip on his neck. "Relax, my boy," I said. "You can trust me. I'm the one who feeds you, right?" Patches didn't relax, and he was not intimidated by my choker hold. So I turned him loose and I let him prowl while I read another chapter and left the motor running. After a while of this, the vibrating of the engine didn't interest him anymore. He hopped over into the front seat, lay beside me and began to purr, which was his way of saying, "This is cool. You don't happen to have any more sardines, do you?" I said, "It happens that I do." I reached into the glove compartment where I'd stashed my sardine reserves, took out another fish and crumbled it into the dish on the floor. While Patches was chewing his first bite, I dropped the gear shift into drive and eased my foot off the brake. That place of Mr. Z's was so nice. In front of the white picket fence was a circle of grass with the driveway all around it. Inside the circle were 2 old lilac bushes, one purple and one white, with wild honeysuckle growing up through them. There was a nice shrub of bridal veil. There was an oleander and a live oak tree, and also a locust tree, where Jerry hung his pink wren house. The circle was almost big enough for an 18-wheeler to drive around. When we had moved into Mr. Z's, our furniture had come ahead of us in a big Mayflower van. Walmart paid for that move, so we didn't do it in a U-Haul. The driver was a nice young man who was studying for his MBA when he wasn't moving furniture across the country. Do I have a story to tell about the loading of that van? But this is not the time. Where was I? He did manage, but just barely, to get around Mr. Z's circle by jigging and jogging and running over the bridal veil bush, which did recover. So that's the size of the driveway there. For my first travel training session with Patches, I drove 2 complete loops around the circle. It took me the better part of a morning. Patches was impressed by my speed. When the wheels first began to roll, he leaped onto the passenger seat beside me. He stretched his front feet up onto the dash. His eyes grew big and round. His world had turned to a liquid and was flowing past him like water. He said, "Wow." I was impressed by Patches. That's the only time I've ever heard a cat say wow. Patches saw the picket fence moving. He said wow again, and the tone of his voice was shrill. He looked down and he saw the yellow grass moving. He looked up and he saw the locust branches moving. He said, wow! He said, wow! I killed the engine. We started the game again from square one, with the sardines and the book and all. That's the way I like to do things. But Patches was a fast learner. By the end of the first morning, his wows were more an expression of wonder than alarm. The travel training continued. After 2 days on terra firma, Patches let me carry him into the car again for sardines and sightseeing. Our drives gradually grew longer until I dared to go all the way down the hill and out onto the busy traffic of the Olive Highway. Soon, Jerry and I were taking Patches with us on sunset drives up the Oradam Boulevard to the top of the Oroville Dam, where we could look down through the open grassy foothills and along the Feather River and out over the distant rice fields and the flats of the Sacramento Valley. It was a beautiful sight, with the sky always flaming and not a cloud in it, and the colors bleeding down from yellow to orange to red. I know the blazing sunset was pollution-induced because of the dust in the air from the intense agricultural activity, but it was awesome just the same. When the time came for Jerry and I to leave Mr. Z's for good, I felt that Patches was ready for the trip. When I was driving with Patches to Wairika, I left him loose in the car, and he behaved himself admirably. But I think that on that day he stopped liking us. At the start of the trip, I made a stop into a shopping mall in Chico to pick up something Jerry wanted, a shoulder rest for a telephone that he could use at work. I bought the shoulder rest and I came back to the Suburban with the parcel tucked under my arm and a coffee ice cream cone in one hand, and when I opened the car door, Patches shot out of it. I made a lightning grab with my free hand, caught him by the end of his tail, and swung him back into the car by it. Poor guy, he spent the rest of the trip lying under my legs. And when I had to stop to the bathroom at the rest stop in Weed, he did not try any shenanigans. So we made it to Wairika. But one day in January, after we'd been in our new home for 3 or 4 weeks, Patches just up and left us. I don't think he ever liked the place. It was as different from his old home as a desert is from a forest. Wairika was in the high desert. There were no oleanders and no orange trees, no figs, no fragrant eucalyptus. There were no tall grasses for Patches to sneak through, no shrubs around the house, and the air was not balmy. Our elevation was at 2,500 feet. One day our closest neighbor, Jack, came walking over from his place with Sissy, his big old black dog. Patches and I were outside by the corner of the house when Sissy came thundering down on us in high gear, and there was no place for Patches to go. He had to race around 3 sides of the house before he could leap up the power pole and jump onto the roof. That incident probably cost us a big bunch of points in our popularity rating with Patches. We made an outdoor home for him up under the swamp cooler by the back door. We made it out of a cardboard box covered with a black plastic garbage bag. Patches did use the box because there was no other place for him to sleep, but I'm not sure he ever liked it. In Oroville, he had become accustomed to sleeping on our outdoor table, and here there was no blue tablecloth with lace trimming inside his new home. The last straw came one windy morning. I was digging steps up into the back bank, moving dirt from one spot to another the way I do whenever I get into a new place. I was also carrying in some rocks from the fields. Patches was in the shed. Whenever I was puttering outside like that and the shed door was open, Patches went in there and slept on the workbench. On this day, the shed door had blown shut, but it wasn't fastened, and the wind was playing with it. Creak, 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 went the rusty hinges as the wind teased the door open several inches. And then the door blew shut with a loud bang. Before long it was creak, creak, creak again, and then bang. At last I became aware of the bang, bang, banging, and I went over to the shed and pulled back the door to fasten it in the open position. Patches jumped down off the workbench with a thump. He trotted out past my legs without looking at me. He trotted across the lawn and around the side of the house, and we never saw him again. Neighbor Jack said that a bobcat likely made a meal of him, but Jerry and I don't like to think so. We like to think that Patches trotted all the way back to Mr. Z's, beguiling housewives along the way into feeding him huge meals of special kitty. We like to think of Patches lying inside the white picket fence at Mr. Z's, sleeping through the sunny mornings in the little damp ditch by the rose bushes. We like to think of him singing through the hot summer nights, and the warm winter nights, and the autumn nights, and singing through the spring. Now that's the end. But I'm going to finish this up with a poem that my mum wrote. It's called Odor to a Water Closet by P.E.L.H. Now I'd like you to meet my mum. Her name is Phyllis Elaine Lloyd Hood. She was born in Nova Scotia on December 1st of 1914, and as of today, in 1995, she's alive and kicking and has good mileage in her yet. I've been pestering Mum for years to feed me with her stories of down to grams. Now she started rummaging through those boxes that she keeps under her bed with her bits and pieces of writing in them, and heaven only knows what else. She sent me a batch of these papers a while ago, and there's one piece in it that's a jewel and that will introduce you nicely to her. It's a poem that she wrote so long ago that the paper it's written on is all brown around the edges. Mum had, let me see, how many brothers? There was Till and Percy and Harry, and there was Bunny and Caddy and Paul. That's 6. And no sisters. So you won't be surprised to hear that she grew up to be more of a tomboy than a lady. She's still like that, and it suits her. Mum has lots of stories in her, and she usually shares them by telling. But now and then she likes to write down a piece of nostalgia, an ode, perhaps, or a variation of an ode, as this poem of hers is. The Lloyds, Graham's family, Mum's family, with all those children, and the parents and the grandparents too, and sometimes a spinster aunt, and sometimes a hired man, and often a girl who lived in and helped out, needed a big privy. And they had one. It was a 3-holer, and I've never seen another one so grand. Mum knew it was a special place too, and this poem is her tribute to the family outhouse. You notice that she didn't call it an ode, but an odor. She knew what she was doing. Here we go. Odor to a Water Closet by P.E.L.H. There's a certain type of structure that's built for privacy and serves the daily needs of each farmhouse family. It's set apart and stands alone in weather-beaten splendor. A path is trodden to its door through grasses green and tender. It may be large, it may be small, its roof may boast a steeple, or weather vane that whirls and beckons to the people. One special type I have in mind, 'tis set beneath the hill. A low, smooth stone is the step that leads onto the sill. A gooseberry bush beside the door is open wide. Honeysuckle climbs the shakes, mauve musk blooms at the side. Bluebells, daisies, goldenrod perfume the summer's breeze, while o'er the rooftop from behind rise scraggly cat-spruce trees. In use, the door is left ajar, with a cover it is wedged. There's comfort in the knee-high seat with 3 ovals, bevel-edged. 'Tis a quiet place for thought. One can dream of future plans, with his elbows resting on his knees, his chin cupped in his hands. The sun pours through the window, it streaks the place with light, where bees of all descriptions pause in their restless flight. A bee comes bumbling in the door to whiz above one's head, then bounces from the window pane and falls as if 'twas dead. It rises up again in fright and bumbles out the door, and one is left in silent peace to sit and think once more. The pointed roof is plastered with cobwebs old and grey, but the lower walls are pasted round with patterns bright and gay. A box is nailed upon the wall, it is within one's reach, and filled with publications to suit the needs of each. A page is grasped between the hands, crushed, rubbed, and twisted round, till it's as soft as any tissue that Rexall drugs have found. My granddad built this castle. He proportioned it just right, so one can stand and button up regardless of his height. That's how my mum's mind works. Beautiful. And that's the end today. Bye for now.